niggas?
You're watching Fugitive Redeye, and welcome to another episode of Redeye Raw. In today's video, I wanted to talk about something I've been wanting to talk about for a while, but keep putting off, because, I don't know. So I finally decided to do it. But before we get into the video proper, just want to say a couple things. I recorded the first part of my Shadow over Innsmouth reading. That's the one that won the poll. That's going to go up whenever I finish editing it. Had to do multiple takes and stuff because I wanted it to actually sound good. So, I'm doing it chapter by chapter, by the way, so I read chapter 1. Other than that, my DVD collection update, I am going to wait until I get more DVDs, so got a few things on the way as is, but it's just going to take a little bit longer for that one to come out. I also recorded a new Sergeant Friends today with Corbin, so I just got to have some time for Corbin to do the art and me to edit it. But enough about that. Today we'll be talking about death of the author, which is sort of a literary theory, which I both agree with and disagree with to certain degrees. And that is the concept of, regardless of the author's original intent, other meaning can be derived from a fictional work. And I think that that's very true. Because I think that, number one, I think that there's a lot of people who misinterpret things that authors say. And number two, I think there's plenty of things where the author was saying one thing, but other messages can be derived from it that can be meaningful and actually accurately be utilized within the work, whether intentional or not. And death of the author is something I use a lot when I have to separate art from artist. There's a lot of people who make things that make great things that I don't care for as people. That said, death of the author is a whole other thing just beside that, right? So when it comes to death of the author, the reason I actually just decided to make it today is because of the movie Watchmen. I just rewatched it. I watched the director's cut, which came with this game. I'm going to do a playthrough of this game on the channel, by the way. But it has nudity in it, so I'm not going to stream it, because I'm going to have to edit the nudity parts out. I don't know exactly when that comes into play in the game, so that's why I'm not going to dare stream it. But anyway, Watchmen is a movie I like a lot, and I've read the comic as well. I actually had to read the comic for one of my college classes. And it was because of that college class where I came to understand issues in interpretation when it comes to Watchmen. And also, Watchmen has a god-awful TV show on HBO. And when that TV show came out, the original author of the comic, Alan Moore, said a lot of things that I frankly thought were stupid and didn't agree with. Because I love Watchmen. It's one of my favorite superhero things. Which is saying a lot, because I fucking hate superhero stuff. But I love Watchmen. Watchmen is amazing. It's sort of a deconstruction of the superhero genre. It's dark, it's gritty, it's thought-provoking, and it's violent as shit. I love it. It's really fucked up, and it's downer. It's massively depressing. But I guess Alan Moore has a very different opinion of one of the most popular, and in my opinion, the best character in the series. And that's Rorschach. Now, Rorschach is a vigilante, much like all the others, because they were all masked superheroes, but then masked superheroes get outlawed, and the only one who's still going around doing it is Rorschach. Rorschach I don't agree with completely, because his worldview is completely black and white. There's no middle ground. He doesn't compromise. Hence a really good quote from Rorschach, never compromise even in the face of Armageddon. Love the character. And in my opinion, even though he goes around and fucking kills people for the slightest of crimes and shit, and is way more over the top and extreme than he should be, in my opinion, I still think he's the most morally sound character in the story, ironically. Night Owl's close, but Night Owl doesn't really do anything after the ending of the story, and there will be spoilers, by the way. But basically in Watchmen, it's this story where, you know, superheroes have been outlawed, And this one superhero named the Comedian gets killed. Turns out the Comedian was kind of a piece of shit. I really like him as a character as well. He's actually my second favorite character, even though he's a total piece of shit. I love him. But even the Comedian understood what the main villain, or at least in my interpretation, the main villain does. Even the Comedian realized how wrong it was. And apparently, from what I've heard, Alan Moore has said contradictory things on whether or not this character, and spoiler, Ozymandias, is the bad guy. He absolutely is. Whether or not Moore intended that, he absolutely is when you read it. Because at the end of the story, he kills millions of people to prevent World War III, and in theory, saving billions. Well, again, I don't like to deal in hypotheticals, number one. I also don't think killing millions of people to prevent the death of billions is justified. Like, I get the concept. You know, I mean, there's the old trolley problem bullshit that commies always like to bring up. And that one's a much smaller scale, because, you know, it's 5 versus 1. That one's a little bit trickier. And, you know, it's the whole needs of the many, needs of the few type thing. And I think with that, there are no absolutes. But the fact is, Ozymandias still killed millions of people on a complete and total fucking hypothetical. Like, granted, I know mutually assured destruction, nuclear war, awful. But it's not like Ozymandias could see the future. Dr. Manhattan could have theoretically prevented it if he hadn't, like, lost faith in humanity because of Ozymandias. Which, it's ridiculous to me, because, like, Ozymandias is the one who makes Dr. Manhattan, like, lose his, like, caring about life by, like, making him think he gave a bunch of people cancer, and it, like, fucks him up internally, so he fucks off to Mars. Dr. Manhattan could have easily prevented World War III, for real, without killing millions of people. Because he could have easily just, I don't know, destroyed all the nukes, teleported all the nukes to Mars. I don't know, something. But Ozymandias is just like, no, let's just kill a bunch of people. And the way he kills them is different in the comics and the movie, by the way. In the comics, he builds these giant alien monsters and gets humanity united against aliens. Whereas in the movie, he makes it look like Dr. Manhattan killed a bunch of people. And that way, the humans would unite against Dr. Manhattan. To be fair, I haven't read the comics since college, so it's been like, what, 2 or 3 years? But I will say this. In the movie, at the very least, Ozymandias is the one who gets Dr. Manhattan to fuck off. When easily he could have been used to prevent war. Like, why didn't he just say, hey, can you, like, teleport all the nukes? And even if he didn't, like, even if he's not the reason that caused the cancer, because I can't remember in the comic if that's exactly how it plays out. I still think it is, because I think he wanted to get Dr. Manhattan out of the way so he could unleash his alien monsters in the comic. But again, it has been a minute. Why didn't he just fucking talk to him and say, hey, why don't you teleport all the nukes out of here? Why don't you do this? Or, like, there's so many other solutions with a being as overpowered, especially, as Dr. Manhattan. But no, he just goes right to, let's kill millions of people. And sometimes Alan Moore in interviews has said, this guy is supposed to be the good guy? Who killed all these people? This is the good guy? Not the one who wanted to tell the people about it. He says that you're not supposed to look up to Rorschach. And you're supposed to, like, look down on him. Even though Rorschach is the one who's going in, figuring stuff out, trying to actually stop this. And Rorschach's the one who actually sends off his journal to the newspaper, the New Frontiersman, so that people will know the truth. Which I think is important. I absolutely love that he did that. Rorschach is easily the best character. But the creator has said, oh, you're not supposed to like Rorschach. He's supposed to be the bad guy. And hence why in that god-awful HBO show, they have like a cult of Rorschach that's all a bunch of racist pieces of shit. It's stupid. No, it's completely bastardized the character. But again, that's when we come to Death of the Author. Don't give a shit what David Moore says at this point. What he wrote in Watchmen is all I care about. And I love Watchmen. Again, the comic and the movie. Not the god-awful show. I've never read the sequel. and I've never played the game, but that will happen soon. The game's a prequel, though. So, that's my jumping off point, right, for Death of the Author. Another example is the creators of The Matrix are both transgender now, and they say that The Matrix is like an allegory for transgenderism, and I don't believe that. I don't believe that was their intention. I'm sorry. They claim that was their intention. I just don't believe it. Like, they bring up all this, like, incidental stuff, like, the red pill represents this pill that you would take, you know, for, like, hormone treatments or something. I don't care. To me, that's all coincidental. Again, and whether or not that even is true, doesn't matter, because that's not the message I take away from The Matrix. The message I take away from The Matrix, which is one of my all-time favorite movies, is question everything. Don't just believe, you know, things at face value. That's what I love about The Matrix. Is you don't just take people at their word. You don't just, again, believe things at face value. Regardless of the gender connotations that the creators have now, which I don't believe them when they say that that's what they came up with. And, frankly, I don't care if that is what they intended, because that's not the message I got. And the message I got is very important to me, because the Matrix was super impactful on me growing up, and still is. Hence why I haven't watched 4, because I have no interest in that. I have no interest in what they have to say now. Now that they've said the things they've said, I have no interest in it. And on top of that, the Matrix sequels weren't even that great anyway to begin with. 2 and 3, 2 was decent. Like 2 was alright. I didn't mind 2. Still didn't compare to the first one at all. 3 was actually pretty bad. I only liked the scenes where they were actually in the Matrix in 3. Did not care for the scenes in when they were fighting the robots and the really bad CGI in 3. So yeah, Death of the Author is a very important thing to me, because you can still take a message away from something whether or not it was intended. I do think people go too far and overanalyze things, and they misinterpret things. I think that's bound to happen when you have that, when you just have human perception. I think that is absolutely bound to happen. There was a book I had to read in college called Beloved. I think I've talked about it on the channel before. I don't know. I hate it. I think it's a garbage book. I had to read it for my literature class, which is also the same class that I read Watchmen in. Now, granted, I had seen the Watchmen movie prior to that class a few times. And I just, like I said, I just watched the director's cut today for the first time, which there's actually 3 cuts. There's the original, there's the theatrical, the director's cut, and the ultimate cut. I thought the director's cut and the ultimate cut were the same thing. They're not. So, I've seen the director's cut, which I've heard actually is the best version. I still want to maybe see the ultimate cut at some point, or I could just watch the Tales from the Black Freighter animated stuff that is the only difference anyway. Anyway, that's beside the point. I'm trailing off. This book, Beloved, it was about slavery, and, like, this lady that escaped from slavery, and then, like, the fucking slave hunters came to get her, because, you know, the Fugitive Slave Act and all that. And then she killed her kid, she killed her baby to prevent it from going into slavery. Actually kind of a compelling, like, the book is not wholesale bad. It has a lot of interesting stuff. There's also, like, the baby becomes a ghost, and then the ghost of the baby becomes the age the baby would have naturally been if it had survived. And then it starts, like, leeching off the mother and, like, sucking the life out of her. And, like, the baby is supposed to represent slavery. I don't know if the author said that, but that's something my teacher said, and I agree. But I don't agree with the interpretation of the ending. But again, the author might. I don't know. I don't care about that. All I care about is the message I got reading the book and what the text contains versus the connotations. And at the end of the book, they get rid of the ghost, because it was, like, slowly killing the mother by, like, draining off her. And it also, like, raped the guy, what was his name? Paul D, I think? I don't remember. I think it was Paul D. He's one of the only characters I liked. Him and, mainly just him, honestly. I didn't like most of the characters in the book. Actually, you know what? No, I liked the original slave master, because, like, he was much nicer than the one that came after him. Like, it's still a slave master, and obviously, in real life, he's not the kind of person I would hold in high regard, but, like, for the time, he seemed like, you know, better than a lot of the others. But anyway, that's the whole thing. Like, those are the only two characters I liked in the book. I found them interesting as characters. Doesn't mean I would have liked them as people. Anyway, at the end of the book, they get rid of the ghost, and then the mom finally is able to move on. But my teacher said, since the ghost represents slavery, the message of the book is we will never overcome the specter and legacy of slavery. It will never go away. We can never move on. Fuck that. That's not the message I got. The message I got was, we need to move the fuck on or we're going to deteriorate away. That's the message I fucking got. Whether or not that's what the author intended, that's the one that made the most sense to me, because they get rid of the ghost. The mom survives because they get rid of the ghost. She would have fucking died otherwise. Also, there's this really dumb stream of consciousness chapter later on in the book that's super pretentious. But yeah, overall, I'm glad I read it, even though it's garbage in a lot of ways for me, because a lot of it just seems kind of race-baity to me, like the way it's interpreted anyway, whether or not that's what the book was intended to. Because I think the important thing is you move on from the bad things in history and you learn from them. That is the thing that I think is most important, is you learn not to repeat bad things from history and you move on. You move the fuck on. But again, that's not the message the teacher got from it. And it's funny, because I wrote a really well thought out analysis of that book in class, basically saying a lot of the things I'm saying here. Didn't get the best grade on it. So for Watchmen, rather than actually giving, what I actually thought about it, I just regurgitated a lot of the shit she was saying back at me and got an A. That's all you have to do in college, is just regurgitate what the teacher wants to fucking hear, and you'll pass the class. Easy enough. Because, she kept talking about with Watchmen how the important thing is knowing, and you can't know how something turned out. So therefore you can't know whether someone did was wrong. Because, perception and knowing and perspective, blah, blah, blah. So, basically saying that Ozymandias could be in the right because you don't know. I'm sorry, but killing millions of people is never in the right. But anyway, I regurgitated it, saying, oh, yeah, maybe, who knows? You just repeat, who knows, like a bunch in the fucking thing, and be like, is that the right choice? I would hope not, but who knows? It's what I gotta do when you deal with fucking teachers like that. A teacher that in my literary class gives us a fucking lecture about whiteness from everyday feminism. By the way, she was a big help in red pilling me. Major turning point, so I appreciate her for that. Anyway, that's what I'm getting at here. A lot of people, authors, put something into a work, and whether or not it comes out that way is really based on the perspective of the person watching it. Obviously, I think that there are objective truths that are important in the world, unlike that teacher who thinks that everything is subjective, and I fucking disagree with that. There's no such thing as everything being subjective. There are objective, infallible truths. Barring some weird philosophical, is reality real? Fuck that, that's hokey bullshit. Point is, reality as we understand it has objective truths. But art, however, is subjective. There are objective qualities in art, and I think it's ridiculous when people don't like to analyze art objectively. In fact, I've become much more objective in analyzing movies and things myself. I've become much more willing to admit things I like aren't good. Like they're not well written, well constructed, well conceived, but I'll still like them. And that's okay. It is okay to like something, but also acknowledge that it's not well produced. Like the Star Wars prequels. I love the Star Wars prequels. I love the story. But guess what? The story's constructed like dog shit. I love it. I have fun. I love the characters. Even though they're not really that fleshed out when you think about it. So, what I'm getting at is, there are objective and subjective qualities to art. When you are basing something solely on the text, however, and you are trying to derive meaning from that text, the only way you have to interpret that meaning is your own perception. And naturally, due to that, there are going to be many people who walk away with a different perspective than the author originally intended. Again, I think sometimes people overanalyze, and I don't agree with what they say. But that said, I have plenty of times interpreted something differently than it was intended to be. And that's okay. You know why? Because it still means that to me. It still has the message I took away from it, and I still love it. Hence why I love Watchmen. Despite the fact that the creator himself is probably not a guy I'd get along with if we started talking philosophy. I still love the story. And guess what? Same guy wrote V for Vendetta. I love V for Vendetta. But you know what? I bet you we disagree on the message in that too. The message I take from V for Vendetta is authority is bad. But the thing I like about the comic of V for Vendetta is it's also very morally gray. Because both sides are terrible in different ways. But yeah, V for Vendetta is great. Again, probably has a different message than I interpret it to have, maybe. I don't know. You know, there's a movie that I enjoy that I should not enjoy. Based on all of my principles and everything I follow, based on the message of the movie, I should hate it. And that movie is Sorry to Bother You. But you know what? I enjoyed it. I'll admit I didn't enjoy it as much in subsequent viewings as I did the first time, but it was still fun. Even though the guy who made it is a fucking communist, and I can't stand communists. And the message is very pro-communist, anti-capitalist. I like capitalism. I don't like communism. I like free market. I don't like things being told what they can and can't do when they're doing business practices. I don't like big regulations. But that's beside the point. Even though that movie had that message, I still had fun with the workplace comedy aspects of it. And I think that comes more down to separating art from artist rather than death of the author. But I think there's some overlap in the concepts. But I still enjoyed the workplace aspect. And it's just because I like capitalism and I despise communism doesn't mean I like big corporations. I don't think anybody genuinely likes big corporations. I have no issue with their existence, but their practices, a lot of the times, I very much dislike. So some of the anti-big corporation message, even though it is coming from a place of a guy who's a communist, I still like some of that aspect. Even though I hate the fact that he's promoting communism. I also think that anything involving the girlfriend character in that movie is garbage. Can't stand it. She's an awful character. I don't like her. And isn't her name like Detroit or something like? It's something stupid like that. Like all the characters have stupid names in that movie. Because like the main character's name is Cassius Green. You know, Cash is Green. Which granted I thought was funny. I also really like the voice he has when it's David Cross talking. I thought that was really funny. And then of course the movie has that twist in the, like, I don't know, if it's at the end of the second act or 2/3 in or halfway in, I don't fucking know. Point is there's a twist that turns it into like a horror movie that I thought was pretty interesting, and I didn't see it coming the first time. Again, there's some allegories in it that I don't like, where they're trying to say, you know, capitalism bad, this, that. But, you know, in the literal sense, it was still interesting in universe, with some of the weird shit. Because, like, spoiler, fucking horse people. I did not expect a movie about fucking call centers to have people being turned into fucking horse people. And that was funny. And I enjoyed that aspect. And, you know, I like some of the jokes in the movie. But yeah, I don't like the message, and I still enjoyed the movie. And I liked aspects of the movie, even if I didn't interpret them the way that the director would have wanted me to. Another thing, the movie They Live. Great movie. I love that movie. They Live is one of my all-time favorites as well. It's not in my top 10 like The Matrix is, but it's definitely in my top 20 or 30. They Live is another one about questioning everything, and also just blindly following what you're told. And I love They Live, because, again, there's a lot of parallels and allegories that I do think apply. You know, like propaganda and things like that. Those things are very real. The news media is basically propaganda. That's all it's been for, like, ever. So, They Live is a great movie. I have, however, seen comments people have made when right-wingers such as myself talk about how they like They Live, and saying, you know that was talking against the conservative establishment at the time, right? Okay. What's your point? The point is we don't like the establishment. Doesn't matter who the fucking establishment is. Authoritarianism is authoritarianism. And just because my values align more with conservative values doesn't mean I like conservative authoritarianism any more than leftist authoritarianism. Because, for instance, there was the satanic panic, you know, people freaking out thinking that, like, Ozzy Osbourne was going to convert your kids to Satanism. That was stupid. Anytime someone tries to say video games cause violence, fuck them. You know, anytime people tried to advance the war on drugs, fuck them. You know, things like that. I think most people could agree on. Like, when there's a lot of people on the particularly puritanical side of the right who want to ban porn. And regardless of what your opinions of porn are, nobody should want that. Because that is taking away freedom. And we can argue all day till the cows come home as to whether or not that's speech, but I think it is. I think it's protected speech. I think there is a time and a place for it. I definitely don't think you should give out porn in, like, kindergarten or some shit, obviously. But I do ultimately think it should be protected by the spirit of the First Amendment. I'm against obscenity laws. And there are people I've seen that are in favor of obscenity laws. And, you know, I can disagree with them on that, and we can agree on other things. But the point is, soon as anyone starts trying to pass legislation to change things like that, fuck them. That's what I'm getting at. Authoritarianism is authoritarianism. Don't care who it is. But again, I'm trailing off on a tangent once more. Because we're talking about Death of the Author today. You know, I definitely think that you can still derive meaning, whether or not it's intended. Although, I do think people... Again, this is a double-edged sword. Because I think people search for meaning where there is none. And they reinterpret things, so there is no meaning. That's why I really like the South Park episode, The Tale of Scrody McBoogerballs, where the boys write this book to be, like, the most offensive book they've ever written. And then, like, everyone starts misinterpreting it to be this, like, really deep allegory, which it's just not. And, let me give, like, another kind of different example. So, Devilman, the manga, very anti-war. There are very heavy themes of anti-war, and that was clearly what Gonagai intended. I love that. I'm very anti-war myself. I can't stand war. I understand that, you know, you need to defend yourself if you get attacked and things like that. But I'm mostly against interventionism. I think that there are times when you have to weigh, you know, helping an ally and stuff like that. I think those things are very complicated, and that's why I'm not in charge of those sorts of things. But I'm ultimately, wholesale, by and large, against war. I hate the concept of it, and I think most people do. I think being anti-war is pretty common. But Devilman was very anti-war, and I loved that. And then you had Devilman Crybaby, which the person who made that was clearly a fan of the original, but they missed out on all the anti-war stuff and decided instead to make Crybaby all about being against racism. And that's certainly fine. You can have that message. I definitely think that's a good message to have. I think that it gets bastardized and misinterpreted and things get called racist that aren't nowadays, obviously. But ultimately, I think, you know, not liking racism, fine. Not liking discrimination, great. But removing the anti-war thing is one of the biggest problems I have with Devilman Crybaby. Making it all about humans, like, being like, paranoid because of demons, it's like, you know, it's kind of a bad example, because the demons in Devilman are fucking heartless killing machines. So I think people are kind of right to be paranoid. Like, the Devilmen are a different case. And ultimately, the Devilmen suffer because of the actions of the demons. And maybe there was a little bit of that in Gonagai's plan originally. Maybe that was part of the original message. But at the core, the anti-war stuff was what mattered. Nobody even realizes that anymore because of fucking Crybaby being everybody's introduction to the series. Which is why we have all these fucking normies joining and misinterpreting it. And also thinking that they know shit about the series when they fucking don't. Anyway, there's a lot of stuff like that. It's like I've said before, like, 1984, right? Great message. great dystopian future, very chilling. And I think most people would agree. But then you have leftists that say, well, you know, Orwell was a socialist. I don't care. He was against authoritarianism, even if I don't agree with his policies on things. Grant Orwell was kind of an anarchist in a way, too, which, you know, hey, that's fine. I have definitely sympathies for anarchy. I don't know how practical it is, but I definitely do sympathize with the mindset. I don't think anarchism and socialism are compatible, though. Like, volunteerism, I get it, but that doesn't work on a scale. And again, I ultimately don't think it should, either. Because, again, you're just taking... Again, that's a whole other topic. I keep trailing off, and I apologize for that. But then again, that's the point of Redeye Raw. But yeah, people say, well, you can't like this, or like all those people that say, you can't like George Carlin because he was a liberal. It's like, yeah, but he wasn't, like... None of his jokes were like anything reminiscent of what you have with woke comedians now. We can't ask the man what his values are, because he's fucking dead. Which is a tragedy, because George Carlin is one of the greatest comedians of all time. And to have some fucking leftist punk be like, well, you know he was left-wing. I don't care. He was pro-freedom. He was against censorship. Which the modern left just isn't. So to try and say that we can't like something just because they have a different view on certain subjects means fuck all to me. So yeah, I think that people go overboard with taking things either A, they interpret things as they shouldn't be, which again, we all do. I get double-edged sword. I think people do make shit up sometimes that make no sense to me. But yeah, like saying that orcs are a racist representation in Lord of the Rings, that's fucking retarded too. But yeah, ultimately, I think that death of the author is something that is definitely useful in doses. Sometimes, you have to not give a shit what the author themselves had. You have the death of the author going hand in hand with separating art from artist. I think those are both very important to enjoying anything, because you're never going to agree with anyone on 100% of things. And to try and act like you're a fucking hive mind that does, just isn't true. And if it is, you're fucking pathetic. Anyway, that's all for today. Have a good one. Toodles.
Hey, man, let's go home.
Curry sauce all over your anus.
Enough with the sauce!
Suck my dick!